This show is listener supported. You can join us and help our show grow to support more adoptees by going to adopteeson.com/partner. You're listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. This is episode 124, Deanna. I'm your host, Haley Radke. It is my absolute honor to welcome Deanna Shrodes to the podcast today. Deanna and I talk about her decades-long reunion with her first mother and her mother's heartbreaking promise to take her biological father's name to the grave. Deanna shares about her lengthy DNA search and the challenging feelings that come along with more and more questions than answers. Deanna is a pastor, and so of course we touch on adoption in the church and the literal ways Deanna is demonstrating what family preservation can actually look like. We briefly mention sexual assault as well as suicide in this episode, so please make sure you're listening without little ears around and that you are in a safe headspace if those topics are difficult for you. We wrap up with some recommended resources, and as always, links to everything we'll be talking about today are over at adopteeson.com. Let's listen in. I'm so pleased to welcome to Adoptees On, Deanna Shrodes. Welcome, Deanna.
Hi, Haley. I'm so excited.
Oh my gosh.
I'm a huge fan.
I have been so over the moon since you said yes. No joke. My husband is like, "What is wrong with you?" And then I said, "This is who is coming on." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I know exactly who you mean because you talk about her all the time." So there you go. You're famous at my house.
Oh, well, listen, I am crazy about your podcast. I am a huge fan. I've listened to all of them, and wow. I think it is definitely the best adoption podcast out there. I will tell you that for sure.
That is very kind and generous, and I didn't pay you to say that. So
No, you didn't ask me to say that at all.
Thank you. So because I've read your blog religiously, and I've read a couple of your books about your story, I feel very familiar with your story. And you've had, a long time reunion with your first mother, and you're on a search for your first father. Where are you right now in your story of reunion and search?
Well, right now, as you know from reading my book, my first mother has passed away, and I am still searching for my biological or my first father. And so that's where I am right now in my search, just to kind of bring people up to speed of where I have come from with my adoption. I always knew that I was adopted. One thing that my adoptive parents did right was to tell me from the very beginning when I was so young, I can't even remember the first time. And although I always knew I was adopted, I didn't know that I had another name. And so when I was hiding under my parents' bed during a childhood game one time, I felt something that was cold and heavy. And when I pulled it out into the light, I discovered a black fireproof box. And when I opened that, that was where I found my adoption papers, my legal name change papers. And it was then that I realized that the first name I ever had wasn't Deanna Lynn Doss, but it was Melanie Lynn Alley. And I asked my parents about it, and they told me that when they adopted me, they had changed my name. And so it was from there. I didn't search when I was a child, although I had ordered my non identifying information and gotten that when I was a teenager. But then after I turned 18, and particularly when I began to have children, it was just a insatiable thirst to know who I was and where I came from. And it was then that I began my search for my first mother. And I found her when I was 27 years old, was in relationship with her and my maternal family for the next 20 years. And then that was when, just almost 7 years ago now, she passed away. And I began my search for my first father.
I'm
So
sorry for your loss. And
thank you.
you also had a maternal sister and brother on that side. Is that right?
Yes, yes, I did. And I'm the oldest, and then there's my sister, and then 2 years younger is my brother.
Okay, so you found her and you didn't have open records, is that right? Like you had to,
No,
okay, so you did detective work to find her, but
yes.
she never told you who your biological father was.
Right. I found her the old-fashioned way. I mean, believe it or not, this will show how old I am, but there was not the internet, there was not email, there was nothing like that. So I was literally searching for her over the phone and through the mail. And all of my correspondence with people, whether it be for city directories or, funeral homes or obituaries, all of that I was getting through the mail. And over the phone. And so I found her without the help of all the techniques that we have today. And what a roller coaster ride that was. And then, like I said, I found her, and then we were in relationship. And then she never, from the very beginning, she wasn't comfortable with telling me who my father was. She just told me that he didn't support her. The very first night that we were reunited, she did tell me that he never supported her and that she didn't want to talk about it. So there was a huge wall there. And due to the fact that I wanted to stay in relationship with her, an active relationship of, being in touch with one another all the time and, getting, getting to know her more, I really did not want to go against that. So I was what I call a good adoptee for 20 years. I mean, I would just walk on eggshells when it came to that subject. I would just walk very gingerly, and just tiptoe around it and try to not upset her or ask too many questions. But then it just really began to be strong in me about 7 years ago that time is going by. I'm not getting any younger, and neither is my father. I realize he's going to be approaching at the time, 80 years old if she told the truth about how old he was at the time. And I thought, this is probably my very last chance to find out where I come from on that side and who he is. And so it was at that point that I wrote a letter to her and decided to do that because I know some people would say, well, isn't that a topic for an in person conversation? I think for most people, it may be. With me, my greatest gift as far as communication would be in writing. And so where with most people I would agree handle something in person and not even over the phone, I've just always been a person that I could usually reach somebody's heart through writing more than anything. If I have something really super important to communicate to somebody, a lot of times I will choose to do it first of all through a letter because I can really put a lot of thought to it, and that is just where I really flow. So I decided that was what I was going to do, and that was going to be my very best shot making this happen. And so I wrote a letter and waited to hear from her. And I mean, I had several other people read the letter, give me feedback on it, and I just let her know that this was super important to me. The years were going by. I don't want to do anything to hurt her, but I just want to ask, can we open up a conversation? My exact words at the end of the letter were, can we please just open up a conversation about my father? And I waited I waited about a week, and then she called and just made small talk about the whole thing for quite a while. And then she said, well, I guess you know why I'm calling. And I said, yes. And she said that she had gotten my letter and it had been a really super hard week, just to think about all this. And then when we got into the nitty gritty of this, she said that she was never going to give me his name. And I said, so that's it. You're just never going to give me his name. And she just matter of factly said, just understand that I'm going to go to my grave with this name. And I had known all along that if she said no to this, I had decided that I was going to do DNA testing. At the time, this was really just starting to be 7 years ago. I mean, it was prominent, but not like it is today. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really just exploded even more and more and more since that time. And so this was in 2013. And so I knew that I was going to do that. But to me, this was a last step of respecting her to say, okay, I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell me this before I take other steps. And, she didn't even realize there were even other steps to be taken. She was not even aware that this was even a possibility. So she let me know that she was not going to ever tell me this, that it was off the table to talk about. Uh, I pushed back a little bit and just said, I don't agree with this decision. I feel like I have a right to know his name. And she said, no, you don't. It's settled. There's no one to ask about this. There's no one besides me who knows who he is, not even your stepfather, not my sister, not your sister. No one knows. You don't need to ask anyone. You just need to let this go and be at peace. And she said to me that night what she said so many times throughout our 20 years of knowing one another. She just said, Deanna, you need to be at peace. She would say, you're beautiful. You're smart. You've raised an amazing family. You're a success. You just need to be happy with that. And you need to just go on and move on with your life. And she would repeat that many times, many times. Just, you're beautiful. You're smart. You're successful. Just, you got to be happy and just move on with that. And that was her sticking point, that, we don't need to go there. And I was so frustrated just realizing this information is not lost. It is not unknown. It is not just out there somewhere. She absolutely knew those two words I was looking for, which was his first and last name. And just to be clear, I wasn't going to ask her to get together with him. She wasn't going to have to see him. It wasn't any of that. I wouldn't have ever, put the two of them in the same room or anything like that. I don't even know that I would have even been in an active relationship with him. I don't even know that he would have even wanted to see me. I just wanted to know, who is my father? And she just let me know that it was totally closed. And then I think she just thought, I've made a decision. It was kind of almost like she had the attitude, I know best. Almost like she's still the adult here. I'm still the child. I'm the perpetual child. She's the adult. I'm your mother. I know what's best. You just need to accept this. And she even quoted like the Serenity Prayer to me. I mean, honestly, Haley, I used to actually like the Serenity Prayer before this conversation. Now I like it's like nails on a chalkboard to me now. It's like somebody wants to say the Serenity Prayer and I'm like just ready to like throat punch them.
So interesting that you say she keeps telling you, just, you need to be at peace. You need to be at peace. Do you think she was at peace?
No, no. I know she wasn't at peace. I know she wasn't. She had no clue what was coming next, because I said to her after all this, when I could see that she was not going to accept what I was asking for at all. And I said, well, I really wanted to be respectful about this and ask you again before I explore other options. And she said, I'm not sure what you mean by that. There are no other options. I'm the only one who knows his name. There's nothing left for you to do. And at that point, I took a deep breath and I just said, well, actually, it's not settled with me. And I'm considering DNA testing as the next step, but I'm really hoping I don't have to do that. I wanted to do the right thing and I wanted to ask you first. And it was at that point that literal all hell unleashed. I mean, it was one of the worst, if not the worst moment of my life, when everything, I think at that moment, she just felt totally out of control. Like, there's nothing, it doesn't matter that this is something I've held in all my life. Science may just undo me here and there's nothing I can do about it. And at that point, she started changing the whole story of what I had always been told, everything that she had said about the history with my father. And the entire story changed. And suddenly, for the very first time, she all of a sudden pulled out the story that she was raped. And this was the first time I had ever heard anything like this. And previous to this, she had even called, the first night that we were ever reunited, she called him a Greek god. She said that my father was partly Greek, or even possibly, I mean, I don't recall at that night, quite honestly. I don't even think she did say partly Greek. She just said Greek, but I know that it's partly because later I did go through all the DNA testing and get my, ancestry composition and all of that. But And of course, those things kind of do shift over time as well, as you probably know, just with certain percentages. But nevertheless,
Hmm.
I have a great amount of, I'm overwhelmingly, Greek. So I do know that that's true. But the first night that we were together as adults, she said to me, "Oh, your father, I always called him my Greek god." And she told me how much I look like him. And that night, you've got curly wavy hair going back just like him, and blah 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 blah. And so this was just completely out of left field when she suddenly claimed that she was raped. And I I said, how does the Greek god fit into being raped? I'm not being disrespectful here. I'm not doubting your story. I'm just asking, can you please clarify? I just don't understand how that fits into all this. And she said, I don't know. She said, I just said it that night. I just don't even know why I said it. I can't even explain why I said it. And then later on, I tried to clarify this again and say, I'm just trying to come to terms with this. I said, I said, if what you're telling me is true, I said, I will have to accept it. If it's true, I will have to accept it. And I have no problem accepting the truth. I just want to know the truth. That's all. I'm just asking for the truth. And she would go on to say later on that in the conversation that she referred to him as the Greek god because I came to the door, back then 27 years ago, and she said, "You were just so beautiful." And I just blurted it out without thinking. And later on in the conversation, and then in a letter she followed it up with, she said, "I couldn't bring myself to tell you that you were conceived from rape because of the lovely pink suit and the pink bow that you were wearing when you came to my door." And I asked myself again and again, what is the loveliness of my apparel possibly have to do with her not telling me the supposed truth? And it never got any clearer. It just went around and around without resolution. Later on, my stepfather um, told me, her husband told me that he said, "Deanna, I do not believe that story." He said, "Our whole relationship of when we dated, when we first met, she spoke about your father." This was his exact words. I'm quoting. He said, "She spoke of your father in terms of I could have danced all night. I could have danced all night." And then this relationship broke up. And he said, "As soon as you brought up the DNA, her song changed to get me off this dance floor."
Mm.
And he said, in my personal opinion, he said, your father was not this evil man and monster that she began to portray him as when you said you were going to do the DNA. He said, I believe he was a very irresponsible man, but I don't believe that he was a monster, an evil man. I think he just hurt her with his response to the pregnancy. And I understand that. I truly do. I truly understand that. At the same time, I don't believe that in any case that a person does not have a right to know at least the name of the person they come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Sealed records. I mean,
Mhm. Yeah, they're
even
very painful.
even if you had your records though from that time, likely his name wouldn't be on it though, right?
She claims that it's not, right? She
Yeah.
claims that it's not, but then the whole story changed so much over the next few weeks. And I say weeks because, ironically, I mean, it's so ironic. It's so crazy. But she said to me, I mean, really through pretty much clenched teeth and very angry, this will go with me to my grave. And it was only a few weeks later that suddenly she was diagnosed with cancer, and weeks later she died. She was literally diagnosed, and within 12 weeks she was dead.
Oh my goodness.
So she did go to the grave with a secret. And I mean, and it was sudden. She was eating some um she was eating some chips and salsa, and suddenly she began to get a pain in her side and said, "I need to go to the ER. Something's wrong." And They at first thought that it was something like a pulled muscle and gave her some cream, but within 24 hours, it was getting worse and worse. She went back, had an x-ray, and sure enough, there was a tumor. And within just a couple months, she was dead. And she absolutely went to the grave with that secret.
And this was after 20 years that you finally
Mhm.
were like, just lay it out, let's see. And it just kind of blew up.
Yeah, it did. I
Mm.
mean, I just tried to be good for as long as I could. I mean, I guess when I say be good, I don't really think it would have been bad for me to ask her. I don't think it was a bad thing to do. I think every adoptee deserves to know
Hmm.
where and who they come from.
Hmm.
But I was trying to preserve my relationship with her, and I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want to hurt her at all. I just wanted to know, who is my father?
Hmm.
Who is my father? That's all I wanted to know.
So, what have you done since? You said you were doing some DNA testing. What's happened
Yes.
since then?
Well, very quickly after that, even before she had passed away, I mean, I quickly got on this. And I had ordered all the DNA kits, Ancestry, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, My Heritage. I was doing a Jet Match.
Shopping spree.
I mean, I did all of them.
Oh my
And
word.
yeah, so I've done all of them. And unfortunately, the vast majority of my matches are maternal. And there are very, very, very few paternal matches that I have. And most of them are fifth to eighth cousins. I have a few third and fourths, but nothing that has been able to lead us to the person. So it's been, and this has been for a solid, I mean, unrelenting, almost 7 years with a team of people who are so amazing, kind, and unselfish that help me in this. It doesn't matter how many brick walls that we run into. Some people have stayed up literally all night long at times helping me. And my friend Gail is the main person. She is a church member, a friend, and she's also my husband's assistant. She happens to be his assistant at the church. And she's the main person who has absolutely resolved this will happen. Not finding him is not even an option. And she's very determined. And every Christmas Eve we gather with our church for communion. And every year for the past almost 7 years now, Gail and I have connected at some point that night and we pray together, and she says, I believe this is going to be the year. And I agree with her. And then usually we're together on New Year's Eve, and sometime during that night we talk about what new things we're going to do for the search. And even when I've gone through my most disappointing days and finding out that a DNA test was not a match, we've tested quite a number. I mean, we've probably tested, I have to look back in our records, but 6 or 7 men have been tested, but none of them have been a match as I was hoping and expecting. So even when I,
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because, as I said, I've been following you for a while. We're Facebook friends, and every once in a while, you'll post this update like, okay, we're testing and like, please pray. And, you know, and then
Mhm,
it's a nothing again.
yeah,
Can you talk
right,
about the ups and
sure,
downs of that?
sure. We've never actually had the man himself because all of them but one have already passed away that we have thought could be my father. And some of them passed away for even decades. But what we've done in the cases where we've done trees, or we have found someone that fits all the non identifying information from the adoption agency, or just someone that we really have a strong feeling about, or someone that is connected already by DNA by like a more distant or a third or fourth cousin. And we begin trying to find somebody in the immediate family. And then what I've done is ask either someone in their immediate bloodline, like their sister, their brother, or their child, to when I say child, adult child, to test. And so it's been all about contacting that person and asking them. With this last person that we just tested, he is alive and he's in his mid 80s, but he's very ill and with Alzheimer's and would never even been able to understand or comprehend, or nor would they have put him through that. So his daughter tested and it was not a match. So this is a little, most people say crazy. When I tell friends of mine who aren't adopted that I do this, they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't even fathom. These have all been people that I've cold called. I mean, just out of the blue, they receive a call.
What do you say?
Usually I say, I know this is going to sound crazy, but if you can just give me a minute of your time and hear my story. And by my story, I mean, I'll give like the 1 minute elevator version, and the 1 minute commercial, and I'll just tell them I'm looking for family. And then I'll just give a very short explanation of how I found them. Maybe I'll say that I was looking through family trees or such and such, and I think that we might be connected. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to explore that more with me and talk with me about it to see how we may be connected, and then go from there. And so far, I've been able to, believe it or not, it's crazy, but I've been able to get every one of them to find somebody in their family who has tested. But it is very unnerving. It does take you have to really want this to a great degree to cold call people and have that conversation.
And
It's
what does the waiting do for you? Like,
ah,
I'm talking about emotionally. What's your headspace at when you know you've got this another test out? They've said yes, and you're like, okay, maybe this is going to give me the answer. What are you feeling in those moments?
mm. It's different now than it was at first. I handle it better. Like I just got the news last week about this last match that it's not a match, and we were commenting. My husband, my niece, Laura, Dennis, and I, who are very good friends. Laura commented, and my assistant at work commented, that wow, you are handling this different than you ever would have years ago. And I think it's because I've grown through this. It's not that I don't want to know as much. It's not that it gets easier. It doesn't ever get easier, Haley. I've changed. I've grown, but it never gets easier. I just learned how to handle it better. It is very hard. The first time I ever took a test, and I think what's so hard about this, I'm not saying it would be this way for everybody, but it's been this way for me. Sometimes when I've called one of these people, like the first one I ever called, immediately when I called and I said why I was calling, and this was this man's niece that I called, who is my age. And I told her what I was calling about. And I didn't even tell her who I was thinking of. I didn't even tell her, you know, I didn't even tell her which family member I thought it was. I just said, I think I might be connected to someone in your family who may be my father. And instantly she gasped and she said, oh my gosh, I bet you're Uncle Jimmy's daughter. And right away, and that was exactly who I was calling about. And she just assumed this is my Uncle Jimmy's daughter. I can picture this happening with Uncle Jimmy. Yes, I truly believe this is it. And then she started connecting all these dots that, she believed just as much as I did that this was going to be a match. In fact, this woman and I look so eerily similar. She and I would have been cousins, and we just even looked bizarrely alike. I mean, it was just crazy. So she found herself wanting this to be the case, and as well. And we took the test, and it didn't end up to be a match. She was completely devastated because we really clicked. She even said to me, you and I clicked more than I do with some members of my family that I've known my whole life. And it wasn't a match. And I can just remember, oh my gosh, this was terrible. In fact, I'll tell you what I did the first time it never matched. The first time it never matched, I got in my car and I actually drove to a massage therapy place, and I just said, do you have an opening? I need an immediate appointment. And my whole body was just aching. It was hurting. It physically hurt so bad. It wasn't just emotional, it was physical. And I remember going in, laying on the table, putting my face through that face hole. And as she was giving me the massage, I just cried and cried and cried. I don't mean like out loud. I didn't cry out loud. I wasn't going to do that to make her very uncomfortable, but I was crying so much that it was just putting a puddle on the floor. she leaned down. She realized I was crying and she leaned down and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yes, please just let me cry. I just need to cry. I need you to just continue this massage and just let the tears come out." And I just got a 1 hour massage and just cried and cried and cried and cried, and then went home and cried some more. And I think I took off work the next day, got myself together, and went back to work. This past week it happened to me. There was no massage. There was no crying on the floor. I didn't even go home from work. I don't even think I missed an hour of work. I just talked through it somewhat. And yes, I did cry, but it wasn't like this thing where I needed to take off work or I thought it was just going to absolutely kill me. It was just like, okay, this is another step in the journey. And I've learned some tools to help me to move forward in those really, 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 really disappointing moments. So it's not that it didn't hurt. It hurt like absolute hell last week when I found this out. But it's just like I said, I've learned to cope with it better.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that there's, a lot of people listening that have experienced that same, like the hope and then the letdown, and knowing how other people process that, I think is so helpful. Let's shift and talk about your writing. What made you decide to start adopteerestoration.com?
It was very healing for me to write about all of this that I was discovering as I was truly, as we call it in the adoptee community, coming out of the fog. When I was coming out of the fog, I started writing for the Lost Daughters blog. And that was tremendously helpful to me. It was just a tremendous, catharsis. It was writing just helped so much. And I found that as I wrote there were various people that would connect with me and say, "Oh, this has helped me so much. This has helped me so much. This has helped me so much." And what I really longed to do through that process was to write about adoption and the adoptee experience, but also in such a way that I could communicate what I was thinking about it on a faith level, and that I could talk about not only adoptee issues with other adoptees from a spiritual standpoint at times, just without any hindrance to that, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm, trying to do, but also that maybe Christians would read there and see a different perspective than they had formerly seen, and see some ways that they could be helpful to adoptees, just because, at times there has been so little support in the community. So I was really surprised, quite frankly. I had no idea how many people would read it, or if really anybody to speak of would read it. But a lot of people did start reading it. And so I'm really honored that anyone reads. I just know they could be reading anything they want. And the fact that they land there and stay there for even just a little while is pretty miraculous to me. So I think the greatest thing I've received personally from it would be two things: the overwhelming support and sense of community with other adoptees, and just realizing how much we have in common, how much the support of one another helps in our experience. And then also my friendship with Laura Dennis, that has been the greatest gift out of that whole writing experience, from Lost Daughters to Adoptee Restoration. And getting to know her, we've really become best friends over these years, and not just on the blog or even on the phone, but even, meeting up in person, even though we don't live close to one another at all. But just having that relationship has been really, really healing to me. And the adoptee community was really, really instrumental in my healing process after my first mother died. And I just think there are some things people just don't understand unless they are adopted. And there's a lot of kind souls out there, like my friend Gail. She is the kindest, most gracious, loving person, and she gives everything to my search for my first father. But she still admits, I don't understand this to its very core, like adopted people do. She's extremely supportive, but there are some things that it just can't be understood except for another adoptee, exactly what emotional roller coaster we're on many times. So that was why I started it.
Can you tell me what restoration means to you? Because I think you have such an interesting name for your blog.
Restoration, restoring what I say on the blog is that we're restoring ourselves spiritually, physically, emotionally as we overcome post-adoption issues. And that could include restoring restoring ourselves, restoring lost family ties in some cases. And then I also really believe strongly, as you know, in restoring rights to adoptees to know their personal information.
Covers
So,
the whole gamut.
yeah.
Well, I appreciate that so much. And, as you said, you were writing about adoption from a spiritual perspective. And, that's how I wish I knew what caused me to stumble upon your blog. It probably was Lost Daughters. But, as a person of faith myself, I have, swallowed all the church stuff forever, right? About how amazing adoption is, how wonderful. And then to realize I'm coming out of the fog, not knowing what that is, and reading your blog and saying, "Oh my goodness, someone else is feeling these things and is
Hmm.
talking about it in a church context." That was
Hmm.
very revolutionary for me, and I'm so grateful for your work in that area. Can you talk a little bit about that, about, the broad church's view of adoption versus family preservation, and, what your journey with just being an adoptee has impacted your faith and your relationship to church?
So many times we don't really sense support from people in the church or church leaders. And I've always been a person who has run to God, but I realize that a lot of people don't do that. And by that, I'm not saying that I haven't hurt God's heart. I'm not saying that I have never disobeyed God or that I've always been right with God. That's certainly not the truth. I'm just saying I've always been drawn to God through the pain. But I realize that a lot of adoptees have run from God and from the church because of their pain, because they're told different things like, oh, just be grateful for your life. Just be glad you weren't aborted. Just trust in the sovereignty of God. Why do you even care about your birth family? Don't you know your parents are the ones who changed your diapers? And don't you see how your search for your birth family is hurting your parents? And, don't you see what a disappointment this is? And you just need to leave your past behind and, yada, yada, yada. And with my faith, I have always been able, even through all that gobbledygook, to just go beyond that and realize that's not God. That might be the church, that might be some church people, but that is not God. And that is not how He responds to us, or He doesn't dismiss us in that manner. And Christians need to be taught that there's a better way. There's a right way to respond to adoptees who may be hurting. And so, for me, when it comes to adoption and faith, it's just always been a natural response for me to just run to God for comfort. I've had a relationship with Jesus just since I was just a little girl, and just that everyday conversation type of talk with God. And it's just been my natural response to just run to Him with all of this pain. And that doesn't mean that I don't still hurt. It doesn't mean that I don't still go through really, really low times, or that sometimes I'm not just a puddle of tears before the Lord. What it does mean is that that's just the main source of comfort. I have other means of comfort, but, everything from, just a self care day at home or whatever. But my main source of comfort is to reach out to God to sustain me through those times. And one of the missions of adoptee restoration for me has been to try to educate Christians on how to better respond to us.
I appreciate those thoughts so much, Deanna. I think it's so complex for adoptees that are struggling, with their faith and the church and, that turmoil. As you said, I know too, a lot of adoptees who've walked away from their faith. And then I watch someone like yourself, and you are like actively living out this view that, family preservation is,
Mm-hmm.
sacred. And can you tell me a little bit of that, part of your story?
Oh, sure. I assume you're talking about my family that lives with me.
I
Okay.
am.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's not an adoption, but it is definitely a family. How would we put this? Just family care, I guess we could say. My niece, who is 27 now, 4 years ago, she was on the verge really of death. I mean, literally. She was on drugs, had been on drugs for 5 years, and things were getting worse and worse. And my sister had even mentioned, we need to prepare ourselves for what very well, could be. And she expected to be just a tragedy if something did not change quickly. And so we had been praying for her, but my sister, just talked to me about the urgency that it really was nearing, a crisis death point here. And I said that my husband and I were going to start fasting. And that's a whole nother, topic for another day. I'm sure that many people are going to wonder what in the world I'm talking about. But as Christians, we pray and sometimes fast as well to just believe for something that we really need to see God move on and do something with. And so we began to fast, my husband and I, and within 8 weeks, I was at my desk one day at work, and my niece called and she said, "Auntie Anna, I'm going to die and I need some help." And I said, "I realize that. And what are you ready to do about it?" And I, being who I am, my first question was, "Are you ready to turn your life completely over to God?" And she said, "Yes." And then we talked about the next step, and I asked her what that next step was going to be. She wanted to go to rehab, and I suggested this Christian program that I know of, that she would actually be in the program for a year and just away from it all and in this program. And she said she was willing to go, but that she needed a place for the baby. And at the time, her son, who has a different father than my little niece, he was with his grandmother, and that's where he was going to be during this time. And she said, "What about the baby?" And I said, "We'll take the baby. If you'll go into the program, we'll take the baby so you can get the help you need during this year." And so she went and she entered the program. We took custody of her daughter, Livy, for a year, and the baby, she was only a year old at the time. And so my kids were all grown. My three children were all, young adults by now. And, I was totally out of the whole baby scene, kid scene. I mean, I'm working a full-time job, as a women's ministry director for, the state of Florida from our denomination. My husband is pastoring full-time. We are not in the baby mindset at all, but overnight, we had custody of a baby, and we brought her home from Baltimore to Florida. And we just overnight, our lives were turned upside down with caring for a 1-year old. And, we weren't part of any specific program like the foster care program or anything like that. So we didn't have a lot of the helps that, different programs like that maybe would have. I mean, we were just thrown out there to say, okay, let's figure out how to do this. So friends were surrounding us. Both of our workplaces are very supportive. So Libby was always, at either my husband's work or my work, which I know a lot of people don't even have that option. So we are just incredibly blessed to have that kind of situation. And Livy basically just did life with us for an entire year, and while her mom was getting the help she needed. And my niece Lexi did just amazing in the program. I mean, she just soared. She just did incredible. I mean, she graduated from that program with flying colors. I mean, it was just amazing what the Lord did in her life and how she progressed and all the things she learned. And of course, she was completely, got completely off of all drugs, and she just had a transformed life. And then when she graduated the program, she moved to be with us in Florida, as well as her son, who was 4 years old at the time. And now Livy is 5 and he is 8. And the three of them are with us. They've been with us ever since. She is a single mom, still getting on her feet after all that she's been through, all that they've been through as a family. And we've just been helping them ever since. And she has a job here. She mostly works at night. And of course, my husband and I work during the day. So we just juggle things. And so Larry and I are helping her to just coming alongside her to support her and help with the children and with whatever she needs. And it's just been an amazing experience. There are so many people that say to me, these things like, "I don't know what those kids would do without you," or, something like that. And I say to them, "I don't even know what I would do without these kids." I mean, literally, they are this. I mean, I have a wonderful family. I have wonderful children. I have a wonderful grandbaby. I don't,
Yeah.
I'm so blessed. But what I'm saying is every single day I wake up and have these amazing other family members in my life who bring so much joy. And I always tell people I feel like I get so much more than they do. So it's just such a blessing to be a part of their lives in this way and see the three of them grow and see the three of them move forward together, see her become the mom she always dreamed of being, always wanted to be. But, when addiction takes over and she just wasn't even in her right mind, but once she was able to become free, she's the mom she's always dreamed of being, and they have the mommy they always long to have. And many times it just takes supportive family or friends or someone to come alongside a mom in need. And so it's our joy to do that. I don't really feel like I get up every day and, oh, I have this on me and I have that on me and I have to do this. I feel like I get to do this. I feel so blessed to be part of their journey in this up close and personal front row seat way.
And so from, someone like me looking online and seeing that you're doing this, I just think she's just living it out, Like there's
Hmm.
not going to be adoption, separation trauma in this family. This is how you preserve a family unit and come alongside. And I just think that's so beautiful. So thanks for sharing that part of your story.
Oh, you're welcome.
As we're wrapping up, I'm curious if you just have any observations from writing your blog for these last years, and if you've observed any kind of changes in the adoptee community since you started blogging till now. Do you feel like there's any more awareness of adoption trauma or any sort of general shifts?
I do sense a shifting. I sense a shifting in one area that I've seen a lot of people admit that there is trauma associated with adoption. And I think a lot of that is just because at some time, so many of the young adoptees are reacting to what they have faced, and parents are desperate to see their children get help or to find out what's going on. And they can't help but be faced with the fact that they're dealing with trauma. And so I think there's a greater awareness of trauma.
Mm,
I do. I see that personally. I don't know whether that's
yeah.
widespread. I don't know whether other people are seeing that, but in my sphere of influence with the people I'm around, I'm surrounded by Haley. One of the things that can sometimes be hard for me, to be honest with you, is that I am so surrounded by adoption, probably even more than the average person, because so many Christians adopt. So, as a for instance, even on the teams that I lead, I might have one third of the people that are either adoptive parents, adoptive grandparents, or their sister, their niece or nephew is adopted. I mean, I'm just absolutely inundated, surrounded. I mean, it's like trigger central. I mean, seriously, it's like
I I understand. I
it,
absolutely understand.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
I think for a lot of Christians, I think that's the
yeah.
case that are
So,
adopted.
so what
Yeah.
I've noticed
Yeah.
is there's a greater amount of teaching today on trauma and all of that with adoptees. And I noticed that sometimes parents just kind of poo poo it or like, oh, that's really nothing. But then it takes a couple years and suddenly their child starts to exhibit some symptoms and some different things. They're like, what in the world is wrong? What in the world is wrong? And then at some point they have to admit, okay, there's something to this. And I'm just saying I've
Mm,
seen that a lot more in my sphere of influence. Like I said, I don't know whether this is widespread across the world or anything like that. I'm just saying with the people that I personally know, a lot more of them are admitting there's something to this.
okay. Well, I think the awareness is good. Increase in awareness. I think that's good. Okay. My last question for you before we go to do our recommended resources is I know that you get tons of messages from adopted
Hmm.
people, emails, DMs. Your inbox probably looks like mine.
Hmm.
Is there one question a lot of adoptees ask, or is there one thing that you really, you want to say to those adoptees that are reaching out to you for some connection or some answer or some wisdom in some form? Is there one kind of message that you would want to share with adoptees that maybe you aren't able to personally connect with each one just because of Oh man, my inbox is real. I think you probably have the same problem.
Yeah, I most of it with me, most of the mail with me because of my books where it touches on the secondary rejection aspect as well as just going on after you may reunite with an unhealed parent. A lot of it is about coping with those issues, dealing with when you have been rejected and you really don't know how to overcome that pain. And then the ongoing pain of when you finally do connect at times, that it continues to be painful because of an unhealed heart. I would just say I'm a completely different person now than I was 7 years ago. And it is possible for you to get through this. I'm not saying it's not still hard, but like I said, I'm the one who has changed. I'm the one who has grown. My mother never changed. She never changed. She never grew in this aspect. She never healed. All of that work has been all the work that has moved forward, with me in that aspect has just been me deciding that I need to be the one to get help. I need to be the one to process things, um, to pursue wholeness, to pursue healing. And so I just want to say, I know that even when it feels like you cannot get out of bed another day, you can't brush your teeth another day, you really don't want to go to work another day. I just want to say you really can. You can make it. You can get through this, and you can be strong again. And let me just tell you, I through a couple of these different situations, especially when the DNA would come back as not a match, there were moments that honestly I didn't want to live. There was a time in the beginning of going through one of those that my husband literally stood at the foot of the bed and started listing off people who loved me so much and would just be absolutely crushed had I made the decision not to live anymore, and just pleading with me, please, please keep pressing forward. You need to you need to get help to get through this. I just want to say that, again, I'm a completely different person in the way I handle this at this point. And I just want to say to anybody out there who is just thinking, I can't walk forward with this another day. I just want to say that in time, you you can move forward to the degree that these things do not completely debilitate you anymore.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, such wise words. Let's go on into our recommended resources. So it's not going to be any surprise to anyone. I've I feel like this is cheating because I for sure have already recommended these things, but I don't care. You guys have to check out Deanna's blog, adopteerestoration.com. It is just filled with wonderful, thoughtful pieces on all kinds of different adoption topics. I mean, my word, you have quite the catalog there. And then, of course, your books, Worthy to Be Found and Restored. And, I was rereading today and I was like, oh my goodness, I got lots of stuff underlined here. And I I remember this one section. I was like, "Oh, this is when I knew for sure you got what I have experienced just so many times
Mm.
and so many listeners of and you're going to laugh at what I think when I read this. Perhaps the question that is most difficult for me, more than any other, is the one I am asked most. How is your adoptive mother doing with all
Oh
of
my gosh, I hate that question.
this?
Oh my god.
So anyway, if you identify with that, you're definitely going to learn from Deanna's books and especially just, you shared part of your story, but this really, both of these go deep into your story, your relationship with your first mother and the ups and downs and what reunion really looks like behind the scenes.
Mhm.
So often we just see the glossed over parts, and we do our best here to not gloss over those ugly parts. And you do the same in your books. The other interesting thing I just wanted to ask you about while we're on the topic of your books is, when I first grabbed the book, Worthy to Be Found, I thought you were talking about yourself,
Mm.
but you're not. Who are you talking about when you say
I'm
that?
talking about my first mother because the first night that I was reunited with her, she told me that she wasn't worthy to be found and that I had found nothing and that,
Mm,
I would regret this decision. So
mm.
uh, I still believe, and I still believe now, Haley, I still believe now, even with everything we've been through and the tremendous pain that I've gone through, even through all that, I still believe she was absolutely worthy to be found.
Mm, mhm. Yeah, I think so too. Um, it's one of those things where even if there's pain, we just want the truth, right? We wanna know the truth, and that's kind of, some of the points you were making earlier about, closed records. Okay, is there anything you wanna tell us about your books before we go on to do your recommended resource?
Maybe just that anyone who is dealing with an unhealed first mother, I think that would really be something helpful. Not so much the worthy to be found, but the restored book to kind of just see the
Mhm.
behind the scenes of what that is like to deal with and maybe some helps to get through that.
I really appreciated this. It's a very intimate view into your healing process. One of the things I have marked, you listed off the things you grieved,
Mm,
and it's so insightful. You say, I grieved my childhood, which was gone. I couldn't go back. I grieved growing up, not knowing my natural family. I grieved my natural mother not responding to me like I wanted her to. I won't read the whole list because there's a whole bunch of them, but these are such thoughtful prompts for us as well as a reader to, go through and think about those things. So it's not um, only your story, it's also a very helpful way to walk through those kind of hard things. And I certainly found it very, very helpful and cried quite a bit when I was
mm.
reading it. Hey, what did you want to recommend for us?
Well, I want to recommend this book, and it's not just because she is my closest friend, but it's because it truly is amazing. And that is Laura Dennis's book that she edited, the anthology, which she edited, Adoption Therapy Perspectives from Clients and Clinicians on Processing and Healing Post Adoption Issues. It is amazing. And I highly, highly recommend that resource.
I have it, of course, it's so good, and you wrote the afterword for that, and there's so many thoughtful essays in it. Yes, I double give my stamp of approval on that. Deanna, where can we connect with you online?
At the blog, adopteerestoration.com. And also, if you're writing to me at adopteerestoration@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, sharing your wisdom with us, and for all the work you've done in the adoptee community online. I'm so grateful for your leadership, and it's just truly been an honor to speak with
Well,
you.
thank you so much, Haley. I appreciate your work too. And I look forward to continuing to listen to everything you're putting out.
Okay, guys, I do not mind telling you that was a bucket list conversation. And I am just so grateful that Deanna took the time to spend with us and share her heart with us. I gushed over her a bit in the interview, and believe me, there was much fangirling before and after the recording was happening. So, I'm just so glad she was able to share with us her story, and to hear it from her voice is so impactful. So please let Deanna know how much you appreciated hearing from her, and go give her some love on her blog and social media. I would really appreciate that. And I also, oh my goodness, I say this every single week. Are you so sick of it? I'm so grateful for you, for listening. Thank you. And for those of you that are sharing the show on social media, it means so much. usually people find podcasts because someone has told them about it. And it doesn't matter about the reviews or whatever, the iTunes charts that I've already told you, I'm not going to be charting anytime soon. But your recommendation to a friend who is adopted, they will listen, especially if you give them one specific episode. And if they are not tech savvy, show them how to subscribe in their phone. And that is just, maybe you'll make a whole new listening buddy, and you can listen and talk about the episodes and decide what's helpful, what's not. And I don't know. I just think that would be such a fun thing to do with an adoptee friend. I do. Maybe I'm biased. Also, I just want to say thank you to my monthly supporters. You know who you are. I'm so grateful for your support. And if some of you weren't so stinking private, I would start listing off all your names, but I'm not going to do that, I promise. I have a amazing network of adoptees and also first parents and adoptive parents that are supporting the show monthly. So grateful. If you want to join them and just say with your donation that Adoptees On is important and you want it to continue, go to adopteeson.com/partner for all the details. And I so appreciate your support. And I know you're probably doing something while you listen to this podcast. You're probably driving or washing dishes or walking your dog or other pet. I don't know what other kinds of pets you walk. My friend walks her cat sometimes. And so you might not be able to just go over to adopteeson.com/partner right at this moment. But if you think of it later in the week, just go there, and your support means so much. And truly, I can't do the show without you. So, okay, that's it. That's all I got. I'm so excited. I had the best time recording this episode with Deanna. So I hope you enjoyed it too. Thanks so much for listening. Let's talk again next Friday.